Your child doesn't exist to be your trophy. Your child doesn't exist to be, your extension or your legacy in this world. Your child is a human being of their own who's going to live their own life. But they're not a chapter in the book that you're writing about your own life. Hi, my name is Rabbi Aharon Loschak. I'm here from the Jewish Learning Institute. Today we're going to talk about parenting, Jewish perspective on parenting, core principles, some basic ideas of what to do, what not to do, what to think, what not to think, and hopefully we'll gain a little bit of insight together as to best approach that very important topic in life.
How do I know if I'm ready to have children?
You're never going to be ready, and you're pretty much always going to be ready. What I mean by that is that ultimately having children is always going to be a leap of faith to some degree. It's an enormous task. It's an incredible responsibility that as much as you're going to hear about it before and as much as you may think about it before, you'll never really be able to really know what it is. And even after it happens, or as it happens, you still don't necessarily know exactly what it is. There's not a single moment. There's no flashing neon sign in your life which will tell you now you're ready. What will make you ready is a lot of faith, which we're going to talk about a lot today probably. A lot of faith and in yourself, which ultimately comes from a faith in God that's imbued within you to have the ability to do so. So you know you're ready when you have sufficient faith to make the leap of faith.
When my baby is young, too young to understand anything, does what happens in the house matter?
The answer, in short, is absolutely. In fact, it matters even before that. We know that it matters already in the womb. What matters, what happens, the conversation around the fetus in the womb, the lifestyle around the fetus in the womb matters. And I'll break that down both from a religious, spiritual perspective, and then we can talk about it from the scientific perspective. From the religious perspective, it's a spiritual thing, of course. The baby's soul is already in formation in the womb, and what goes on around the baby has a profound influence on the formation of that soul and the subsequent formation of the identity of that child when they're going to be born. So there's actually many Jewish customs around already, again, in the womb, a pregnant woman, around governing the behavior of a pregnant woman vis-a-vis how it may affect the child. Examples of not going to a cemetery because it's a place of death, not being around or seeing unkosher animals, because again, that can have a negative spiritual impact on the fetus's soul. Those are just some examples in Jewish law and custom of how we take it very seriously already in the womb. So certainly, just by a matter of inference, but it's also in Jewish custom and thought, certainly when the baby is born, what we say to them and what we do around them, both in behavior and speech, has a profound impact on the child, and arguably maybe even more than when it can actually process it, because it's a more spiritual, like kind of direct into the soul type of relationship. So that's from the spiritual Jewish perspective, and it's backed up by a lot of modern research from today, that we know that what goes on for a child, the attachment that's formed even as a small infant, most hospitals today would give the baby, let's say, for example, they'll take the baby and immediately give it to the mother to put on her skin so it can form a physical attachment, which has a profound impact on the cognitive and emotional development of the child. There's a lot of research talking about how the fetus could hear what's being said outside the womb and the impact that could have on a subconscious psychological level. So any which way you look at it, the answer is absolutely.
At what age should I start Jewish education for my child?
Building on what we talked about just before, that everything has a profound impact already from day one or even before that. So the answer is obviously from day one. So any education that you want to give your child, anything, starts from the very beginning, and that applies certainly to Jewish education as well. So again, with the things that you talk about, the way you talk to your child, even an infant, the way you handle them, the environment that you build around them, the lifestyle that you show the infant, again, even though they don't necessarily show you active cognition, but it seeps in undeniably. You teach a very young child, as soon as they're able to talk, you teach them how to make blessings over food, how to make blessings over after eating the food, before eating the food, how to do basic prayers. Boys, you teach them how to wear kippah, head covering, and to wear the tzitzit fringes on their body as soon as they can, usually in most communities already from the age of 3 years old. Girls are taught how to light Shabbat candles already, also from 3 years old. So these parts of formal Jewish education, as the child grows, but again, not waiting till they've grown any much past the very beginning stages of that growth. Right away, we bring in the educational steps at that very level.
What is the best course of disciplinary action when it comes to parenting?
So parents will stop themselves at some point and realize that basically 95% of our interactions with our children is police work or basic provision. So I'm providing them with food, with shelter, with clothing. And the bulk of the time that we're interacting in the home, or even when we're away from the home, is do this, don't do that, don't kill each other, don't kill someone else, don't kill yourself. And that's a lot of what happens as a parent. So what does it mean to actively parent instead of being a reactionary, either policeman or custodian? And the answer is really one thing. It's about transmitting values. And so in that context, it's important for a parent to understand that the discipline has nothing to do with the parenting. Almost nothing to do. The discipline is a reaction, and many times it's necessary because kids will do things that are unsafe, either to others or to themselves, so you need to discipline them. But other than that, the best way to discipline is to instill values into your children that make the discipline very much secondary.
What is the most important lesson to instill in a young child?
Objectively, again, it's a little hard to answer that question, but if I had to peg any one particular thing, especially coming from a Jewish perspective, probably one of the most important things you can instill within your child is the idea of a higher authority. And for many reasons, just to name a few, the idea that a higher authority, we call it God, but you could use different words depending on the child and depending on your particular language. But surprisingly, children very much acclimate towards that type of language of God, higher authority. Children are intuitively very comfortable with that type of language. When you gift your child that idea and that value, so it gives them a sense of purpose, it gives them a sense of direction, it gives them an idea of absolute morals and values for themselves. It gives them a sense of empowerment. It gives them a sense of outside of confinement, but not in a bad way, in a good way, a sense of structure. So all those types of things come with the knowledge that there's a higher authority. So why do you need to wake up in the morning and be a good kid? Why do you need to go to school? Why do you need to excel in what you do? Why do you need to have friends? And why do you need to respect your friends? Why do you need to respect your own property? And why do I need to respect someone else's property? Why is it worthwhile? Why is it important for me to have nice language? Why? All these things. The answer could be because that's the only way you could be successful, get ahead in life, and end up having a nice career and being a good CEO with 3 cars in your driveway. That's one answer, but that doesn't really resonate with children for sure, and most adults neither. What resonates with children, and again, with most thinking people, there should be a reason and a purpose and a meaning to what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And again, children are intuitively much more spiritual than their adult counterparts. So when you instill with them that knowledge that there's this higher authority, and that's why it's important to do all those things and to be all those things. So it empowers them and it gives them a very healthy step ahead.
And what would you say to parents who want their children to find that out on their own, as opposed to imposing on them from a young age?
Your children are going to find it on their own wherever they want to find it on their own anyways. Regardless of how much you do or don't allow them to do that, they will do it, especially in today's day and age, the information age in which we live. It's a fallacy to think that if you're not going to let them, they won't find it. You're giving yourself as the parent way too much credit. Your kids will definitely find out whatever they want to find out. So the only thing so the question is, okay, so where do you want your child's source of values to be from? If you have values as a parent, which I would hope every parent does, that means that it's important to you. And that means that you hold that it's objectively important so much, and that's why you aligned yourself with that value. So by definition, it should be something that you want to gift, not impose. You want to gift it to your child. And this is the value they want to give them. Do you want to make other sources of values available to them and remove yourself from the picture? So that probably means that you don't necessarily value it as much yourself. which is a question that you have to ask yourself, which is what most of parenting really is. And anyways, like I said before, the child will anyways find those sources of information. So whatever values that you hold important, again, if you think it's important, it's probably a good thing, at least in your eyes. So give it to your child because it will only fortify them. It will only give them a good standing upon which they can thereafter receive other values. And if they take to something else that's either complementary to what you've taught them, or maybe even against what you've taught them, then you'll deal with it then. But it's going to happen anyways.
What do I do if my child does not want to practice my faith or wants to practice a different faith?
There's nothing you should do, per se, as a parent. What you can keep doing, or how you should have the reaction, so to speak, that a parent should assume is one of connection. I would use that word, and I'll use it a lot, because for whatever reason, your child has rejected something that's important to you. So first of all, don't take it personally. It's not necessarily, in some cases, it's a rejection of the parent. But usually it's not. It's for whatever reason, the child doesn't hold that important enough. For whatever reason, they've discovered something else. It's a friend, it's a movie, it's a number of movies. I don't know. It could be so many things. Either way, and even if it is the first scenario, even if it's the child actually rejecting the parent, it only emphasizes the point that the connection is what needs to be maintained. If what's important to you as a parent is that your child have the values that you hold dear to yourself as a person, and you want your child to hold them, to carry that on, to have those values for them as a person as well. So that's the goal here. The goal is not for you necessarily to have a further manifestation of your own being in this world. It's not what being a parent is. That's not what a child is. So if that's the goal, if the goal is to instill and to gift your child with what you feel is the best values that they could have, the feeding ground, the place where that could best be nurtured is in a place of attachment, connection, and love. So first and foremost, don't reject the child, because that's literally counterproductive for what you as a parent want. Forget about any other reason. And there are many. So don't reject the child. Maintain your connection to the child. In fact, work on improving your connection and attachment to your child. Because again, only within that framework and within the petri dish of your attachment will grow whatever values you want to instill upon them, hopefully. Maybe not. You can't be guaranteed, but at least you can try. So many parents do feel that when their child goes astray, it's their fault. And the answer to that, the reaction I would give to that is that that's not true. You're giving yourself too much credit, because when the child turns out really good, it's also not your credit. You could do as much as you can, and obviously it's not entirely not your credit. And maybe when things go awry, maybe it's not entirely not your fault, but that's really not the point. The point is that you do your best to provide your child with safety, with security, with love, and that baseline of attachment. From there, within that framework, you try to instill with them values and equip them as best you can for their life. If, for whatever reason, it doesn't stick, and I stress for whatever reason, because it's not the parent's fault, it doesn't stick, there could be so many reasons. And it's not your fault per se. And one more thing to bear in mind, and this is a huge idea, a huge point, which is relevant to every one of these questions, is that just like I said, just like you can't take too much credit, you can't take too much fault, there's a huge element of God here that we're forgetting. And that is that it's not entirely up to you. As with anything in life, there's a limited amount that we human beings can control. And just to transport that conversation into different areas, people in business see this all the time. They can put in the best efforts and things could bomb. And other people could put in very little effort, or they put in investments in one place and they see spectacular success in a completely different area, or entirely disproportionate to how much they've invested, and vice versa. So there's not always a direct correlation between the effort that a human being puts in and the results that they then see. Oftentimes it could be either much more, much less, or entirely unrelated, because God is involved. So of course, we do as much as we can as humans. That's what we're supposed to do. And we do it in our business lives. We do it in our romantic lives. We do it in our in our parenting lives. We put in as much as we can. But ultimately, it's not going to be up to us. And we don't directly manipulate it as much as we think we do. In fact, much, much less than we think we do. Your child doesn't exist to be your trophy. Your child doesn't exist to be, your extension or your legacy in this world. Your child is a human being of their own who's going to live their own life. And they're not a chapter in the book that you're writing about your own life. Absolutely not. They have their entire own book. If anything, you're a footnote in their book. Whatever happens, again, you do your best, and you care, and you care deeply, and you pour blood, sweat, and tears as much as you can. But it doesn't mean that they're responsible for your well-being. It doesn't mean they're responsible for your success, and it doesn't mean they're responsible for your failure as the parent. So when I say don't take it personally, what I mean is that you have to understand that they're a human, you're a human. And you each have, ultimately God has given you different roles on this earth, and your job is obviously to educate them as much as you can, to instill those values as much as you can. And God has endowed you with infinite capabilities to do so. There's only so much you can actually do, and the rest is up to Him.
There's a story in the Bible where Abraham is advised to send away his child Ishmael because he's misbehaving and he's not being a good influence on his brother, i.e. he's not behaving according to the values that Abraham has and intends to share with his son Isaac. Based off of what you're saying, how would you respond?
We can assume that the action was necessary because there is a point when the impact that one child's behavior has on the environment, they need to be removed. As much as we want to love our child and we want to remain attached to the child, it could be that practically speaking, they may be harmful in a certain environment. They need to be removed and put somewhere else. That's not a contradiction. And at the same time, we don't know if Abraham completely severed his relationship with Ishmael. It could be they stayed in touch. They didn't have WhatsApp, but they could have some sort of method of communication. They could have maintained the relationship. It was just harmful for Yishmael and Yitzchak, his other son, to be in the same place, in the same home. So oftentimes parents will be faced with incredibly difficult decisions. That of the love for their children, or maybe not even if it's pitting one child against another, even for that child themselves. If for whatever reason it's destructive for a child to be in their parents' home. Sometimes children have toxic relationships with their parents. And for the child's own good, the parents have to make a difficult decision to send the child away. Does that mean they're ejecting the child from the home and they're severing their attachment? No. They're cultivating the attachment in a different way. If the parent would throw the child out of the house and then say, I'm never talking to you again, get out of our lives, we hate you, yeah, that's probably a bad thing. But if they send the child away from the house to go spend the year or next 2 years with a cousin or with a friend or not a friend, but another family, depending on the age, and in the process, they explain to the child that we love you and we're doing this for your own good because, depending on, again, how old the child is and how their level of their understanding, but you gently tell the child that we're doing this for your own good and we love you and we're going to stay very much connected. So then that could be that in those extreme scenarios could be the most productive thing to do. So that said, it's obviously important to remember and to understand that everything is case specific to a host of things. The family dynamic, the level of religion, religious observance, the age of the child is critical. So off the bat, I would say that a younger child, I'm talking, let's say 12 and under, or 10, I don't know, a younger child who are completely dependent on their parents, if they're free thinkers and they're bucking, the basic values of their parent, it's definitely within the parent's jurisdiction and imperative to step in and be a little bit more disciplinarian and say, no, in this house we do X, and we want you to do X, with considering everything I said before. As the child gets older, when they enter their teenage years and certainly adolescent years, so then there's going to be less and less place for that, and there's going to be more place for just fostering attachment, connection, and showing a living example and trying to instill the values in a more osmosis type of way rather than frontal, diet monologue way. So that's just one distinction. And again, there could be a host of them.
At what age do I need my child to make his or her own choices?
So it's always going to be a balance, but the answer really is always and never. In the sense that your child, like I said before, I think multiple times, your child will always anyways make their own decisions. And it's your as a parent, you're going to always need to give them the space to make those decisions. At the same time, as a parent, you should always be instilling values to them in a way that should inform their decisions for life. So you're never off duty, and you're always on duty, and you're kind of always off duty at the same time, if that makes any sense.
If you could give all parents one piece of advice, what would it be?
That God is on your side, in the sense that you're not doing this alone. You have it's important to remember, as a parent, you have infinite capability to catastrophically destroy your child, which at the same time gives you infinite capability to incredibly raise a beautiful human. It's the same thing. If you could destroy them completely, you could build them up completely. And both of those dramatic outcomes don't come because you're an incredible person. I mean, you probably are. But it comes because for this child, God is your partner, not for someone else's child. You can't mess someone else's kids as much as you can mess up your own. And you can't raise a good child as of someone else's child as you can raise your own. Why? Because God is partnering with you. So every morning when you wake up and you feel incapable, or every morning or every night when you've had a kerfuffle with any one of your children and you feel like you've messed it up and now it's all over, it may be, but you have the infinite capability to make it good again. And you always have that power, and you always empowered to do it, so go ahead and do it. This has been a lot of fun. This has been insightful. And parenting is very hard. It's arguably one of the hardest things you're ever going to do, but it's incredibly enriching. It demands so much of yourself. And maybe one final closing thought, that arguably one of the most important things with parenting is to understand that the work of parenting, meaning not the service of parenting, of instilling values in your children, but the work that you're going to have to put in to be good at it, is not incumbent upon your child. It's incumbent upon you, the parent. So the way to become a better parent is not to do better parenting, but to be a better person. And from there will flow all the better parenting. So when your children challenge you, don't hit them on the head, hit yourself on the head, and you'll become a much better person for it.